Good morning, my dear students. Welcome to today's science class. So, today we are going to start chapter 5, that is separation of substances. So, let us discuss the important topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. So, first we'll have an introduction of the chapter. That means the important part we'll discuss in brief, or we can just have a summary of the entire chapter in brief in that introduction part. Then we'll discuss methods of separation, where we'll discuss six different methods of separation, starting from hand picking, tracing, winnowing, sieving, sedimentation, decantation, and filtration, then evaporation. So after covering these methods of separation, we'll cover the topic where we'll discuss a separation where more than one method of separation is used. So, and then finally we'll discuss about solubility of water. So now let's start the introduction part of this chapter. So here we have chapter 5, separation of substances. So why there is a need of separation at all? So in our day-to-day life we often come across the situation where we have to separate something from a mixture. So if we discuss more specifically things which are shown in the diagram, here we can see uh, a tea leaves. The tea leaves are being separated from the liquid with the help of a strainer. So this is a kind of separation where a strainer is used to separate the tea leaves from the liquid. Then the farmers, they separate the grain from the stalks with different methods, mostly using threshing. So they used to heat it on hard objects, and then the grains along with the husk, they come out from the stalks. So this is separation of grains from the stalks. While harvesting, this method is generally used. Then we can also uh, give an example where a butter is taken out from the milk by churning, which is shown in this picture here. So this is a picture showing the separation of butter from milk. So when the milk is churned thoroughly, its components, they get separated. So this is another method where butter is being taken out from the milk. So grain is separated from stalks while harvesting. Milk or curd is churned to separate the butter. As we learn in chapter 3, we in the chapter fiber to fabrics, we have seen how the ginning process is used to separate the seeds from the cotton. So that is again a kind of separation. So perhaps you might have eaten salted dalia or poha. So at times when you get food, let's say if you get biryani, and uh, and in biryani you find certain things which you do not like. So like for example, suppose you don't like beans. So if beans are there in the biryani, you would do what? You would try to pick the beans, and or you will be careful so that you do not eat the beans along with the biryani. So then again you have to separate the beans. You quite often we come across this situation. For example, even chilies, many people who don't like eating chilies, and if they find chilies in the veggies or vegetables, they try to ignore the chilies, or they will simply take it out and they will put outside. So that is again a kind of separation. uh, Now suppose you are given a basket containing mangoes and guavas and asked to separate them. So what would you do? Pick out one kind and place them in a separate container. So this is how we can separate things from a mixture. So uh, now separating certain things is quite easy because of their size and their structure, but there are certain things in which you cannot separate the mixtures quite easily. Now suppose you have to separate the salt particles from sand particles. So if you mix salt and sand together, and if we are asked to separate the sand particles, I don't think it is going to be very easy. So those kind of mixtures, it becomes quite tough. So for separating those mixtures, again there are certain processes. So we will be covering all those processes in this chapter, where some few things can be separated quite easily using some physical processes like hand picking, tracing, and on the other hand there are certain mixtures which cannot be separated easily. So for those type of mixtures also there are certain processes. Now uh, there is an activity 1. So what is activity 1? In table 5.1 there are three columns actually. So this activity 1 can be understood from table 5.1. So this is table 5.1 where we have let me just put off the video so that we can see the table nicely. So okay, so this is table 5.1 where there are three columns. The first column describes about the separation process. The second column is about the purpose for which the separation is done, and the third column is about what are the components which are separated and how what is done on those components. So actually the second and third column are jumbled up. You have to match column 1 with 2 and 3 respectively. So now starting with the first column and number 1, that is to separate stones from rice. Now what do you think should be the second column or its match in the second column? So separate stones from rice, and we know what stones are. Stones are like impurities present in the rice. So basically I mean the answer will be undoubtedly it has to be 1 with C. So this has to be related with this C, that is separate stones from rice, and purpose for which we do the separation is to remove impurities or harmful components. Then what do we do with the separated components? So we throw away the impurities. So this will be again related with this, as it is mentioned what impurities or harmful components. So we throw away the impurities. Now what about the second part? Churning milk to obtain butter. Now we know when we churn the milk, even after extracting the butter, the remaining part can be used. So we can say both are useful components. So here number 2 can be matched with this part, that is to separate two different but useful components, and then both this component can be used. So this is matched with the third part in column 3, that is we use both the components. So this is 2A3. Now similarly, now the third process, that is separate tea leaves, will be by default matched with B, and then to after this non-useful components is removed, what is done, this non-useful component is being thrown away. So this is 3B and then 1. So with this table we understood certain components are separated, and why they are separated, because they are not useful. And then certain components in a mixture, there are certain components where both the components or all the components in a mixture is useful, even then we need to separate them. So this is how we separate few things, and then the components are sometimes used, and sometimes certain components which are not useful are also thrown away. So that's all for today's class. Hope you have understood the things which are discussed in today's class. So in the next class we'll start discussing the different process of separation or the methods of separation. So that's all for today's class. Thank you, my dear students.